Before every corner had a store and before kitchens filled up with gadgets nobody really needed, families cooked differently. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. What got saved, what got reused, what got stretched into another meal, that wasn't optional. That was how you made it through. These weren't tricks passed around for fun. They were habits that kept food on the table when money was tight, and the nearest town was a long drive on rough roads. Using bacon grease for cooking after breakfast. That grease left in the pan didn't go anywhere. It went into a jar. Usually something that used to hold coffee or pickles, sitting right there next to the stove where you could reach it without thinking. Every household kept one. Some families had two, one for bacon, one for everything else. Nobody called it a hack. It was just what you did. Bacon cost money. Throwing away what came off it made no sense. That fat carried flavor. Smoky, salty, deep. You'd fry potatoes in it, and they'd taste like something worth sitting down for. Eggs cooked in a spoonful turned into a different meal entirely. Even cornbread, when you greased the pan with it before pouring batter, came out with a crust that crackled. Some folks kept it on the counter. Others put it in the icebox if they had the space. Either way, it lasted months, sometimes. You didn't waste it, and you didn't run out. These days, people pour it down the sink or toss it. Back then, that would have been unthinkable. Making homemade buttermilk. Buttermilk showed up in a lot of recipes. Biscuits, fried chicken, pancakes. But not everyone had it sitting around, and not everyone lived close enough to a store to grab it on a whim. So they made it. Took about 10 minutes, maybe less. 1 cup of regular milk. 1 tablespoon of vinegar or lemon juice. Stir it once, let it sit. The milk would curdle just enough to thicken up and turn tangy. That's all buttermilk really is. Milk that's gone sour in a controlled way. The acid does the work. It wasn't about being clever. It was about not making an extra trip. You used what was already in the kitchen. Biscuits made with this came out just as fluffy. Fried chicken marinated in it turned out just as tender. Nobody could tell the difference. And if they could, they didn't say anything. A bottle of real buttermilk cost 3 or 4 times what a splash of vinegar did. That adds up when you're cooking for a big family or just trying to get by. Every family had their own version of this. Some swore by lemon juice. Others only used vinegar. Freezing leftover biscuits. Biscuits didn't keep long on the counter. A day, maybe 2, and they'd start going hard. But if you made a big batch, and most people did, you'd end up with more than you could eat while they were still good. So they got wrapped up and frozen. The trick was letting them cool all the way down first. If you wrapped them while they were still warm, moisture would get trapped inside and turn into ice. Then when you reheated them, they'd come out soggy. But if you waited, let them sit until they were completely cool, then wrapped each one in foil or wax paper, they'd freeze solid and stay that way for months. When you wanted one, you pulled it out, 30 seconds in the oven, maybe a minute if it was big, or you could wrap in a towel and warm it by the stove. Either way, it tasted close enough to fresh that it didn't matter. This saved time, saved effort, saved flour. You didn't have to start from scratch every time someone wanted biscuit with their beans. Some households did this every single week, using potato water to make gravy. When you boiled potatoes, the water turned cloudy, starchy. Most people dumped it down the drain without a second thought. But in a country kitchen, that water had a use. It thickened gravy. Potatoes release starch when they cook. That starch dissolves into water and gives it body. If you heated it back up, added a little flour mixed with cold water to keep it smooth, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, you had gravy. Real gravy. The kind that coated a spoon. Some people added a splash of milk or cream to make it richer. Others left it plain. Either way, it tasted like something that took more effort than it did. And you were using something that would have gone to waste otherwise. It wasn't fancy. It was practical. You boiled potatoes almost every day in some households. That meant you had gravy stock almost every day if you wanted it. Nothing left the kitchen unnecessarily. Not even the water. Using cornstarch for thickening. Flour worked for thickening, but cornstarch worked better. It didn't cloud things up the way flour did. and you didn't need as much of it. A tablespoon could thicken a whole cup of liquid if you did it right. The part that mattered was how you added it. You couldn't just dump it into something hot, or it would clump up and ruin the whole pot. You had to mix it with cold water first. Stir it until it was smooth, then pour that mixture in slowly while you kept stirring. That's what kept it from turning into lumps. Gravies, pie fillings, soups, all of it. Cornstarch handled it, and it cost almost nothing. A box lasted months, sometimes longer. You didn't need specialty ingredients or complicated techniques. Just cornstarch and a little patience. Pies thickened with it came out glossy and firm. Gravy stayed smooth. It was one of those things that once you knew how to use it properly, you wonder how you ever cooked without it. Making homemade tortillas with flour and water. When bread ran out and the store wasn't close, you made flatbread. Flour, water, salt. That's all it took. 2 cups of flour, 3/4 cup of warm water, half a teaspoon of salt. Mix it, knead it for a few minutes, let it rest, then roll it out thin and cook it in a dry skillet, 30 seconds per side. You'd see bubbles form and brown spots appear. That meant it was done. If you had lard or oil, you got a little to make them softer, but even without it, they worked fine. They weren't meant to be perfect. They were meant to fill you up. You could spread butter on them while they were still warm. Roll them around leftovers. Use them in place of bread when there wasn't any bread left. Families made these in the middle of the week when supplies were running low and payday was still a few days off. It wasn't about being creative. It was about having something to eat. Ask 3 people and you'll hear 3 different ways of doing it. Saving chicken bones for soup. A roasted chicken was never just one meal. You ate the meat, then you saved the bones. Every single one. Even the ones people had already eaten off of, because they were going into a pot and boiling for hours anyway. You'd throw them in with onion, celery, carrots, whatever you had that was starting to go soft. Cover it all with water, bring it to a simmer, and leave it alone. For hours, sometimes longer. What you'd end up with was stock. Real stock. The kind that turned thick when it cooled because of all the collagen that cooked out of the bones. That stock became the base for soup. You'd cook rice in it, make gravy with it, or just heat it up with a little salt and drink it when someone wasn't feeling well. 1 chicken could give you a gallon of stock. Easy. That was a week's worth of soup or more, depending on how you stretched it. Nothing about a chicken went to waste. The meat fed you once. The bones fed you 3 or 4 more times after that. Using a mason jar to shake salad dressing. Salad dressing didn't come from a bottle unless you bought it that way. And most people didn't. They made it. 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar, a spoonful of mustard to keep it from separating, then salt, pepper, garlic, whatever you wanted. All of it went into a mason jar. You screwed the lid on tight and shook it. Hard. 30 seconds, maybe a minute. The jar's shape made everything blend together. The mustard held it there long enough to use it. When you were done, you just left the jar in the icebox. Next time you needed dressing, you shook it again and poured. No bowls to clean. No whisk. No extra containers. You made it and stored it in the same thing. And you knew exactly what was in it because you put it there yourself. Store-bought dressing had ingredients you couldn't pronounce and cost more than it should have. This cost almost nothing and tasted better. Some families had 2 or 3 jars going at once, each one a little different. Cracking eggs with 1 hand. In a busy kitchen, both hands were usually doing something. Stirring, flipping, holding a bowl. So when it was time to crack an egg, you didn't stop what you were doing. You cracked it with 1 hand. You held the egg between your thumb and 2 fingers, tapped it once against the counter or the edge of the bowl. Then use your thumb to push 1 half of the shell away while your fingers pull the other half toward you. The egg dropped in clean. It took practice. You get shell in there at first. Everyone did. But after a while, you get the feel for it. How hard to tap, how much pressure to use. Then it became automatic. It wasn't about showing off. It was about keeping up. When you were cooking breakfast for 6 people and everything had to be ready at the same time, little efficiencies like that added up. Your other hand stayed free to grab the next egg, move a pan, wipe up a spill. Making homemade pancake mix. Mixing pancake batter from scratch every single time got old, especially on Sunday mornings when everyone was hungry and you were already behind. So people started making big batches of the dry ingredients and storing them. 6 cups of flour, 3 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of salt. Mix it all together. Put it in a container with a lid. When you wanted pancakes, you scooped out a cup of the mix, added an egg and some milk, stirred it just enough, and cooked. 5 minutes from start to eating. Maybe less. You could make it your own too. Add cinnamon, add powdered buttermilk, add whatever you wanted before you stored it. Some people put powdered milk in so they only had to add water in the morning. It saved time, saved money compared to box stuff. And it tasted better because it was fresher. One batch could make 20 breakfasts or more, depending on how many people you were feeding. Once you had a jar of this sitting in the cupboard, pancakes stopped being a project. Turning stale bread into croutons. Bread went stale. That was just a fact. It happened faster in the summer, slower in the winter, but it happened. And when it did, you didn't throw it out. You cut it into cubes, tossed it with butter or oil, seasoned it, and baked it until it turned crispy. 3/4 of an inch per cube, spread out on a sheet pan. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, maybe some dried herbs if you had them. 15 minutes in a hot oven, stirring halfway through, so they browned evenly. That's all it took. They tasted better than anything you could buy. Crunchier, more buttery, seasoned exactly how you liked. And they solved the problem of what to do with bread that had gone past sandwich-worthy, but wasn't moldy yet. You could keep them in a jar for a couple weeks, though most of the time, they didn't last that long. People would grab a handful straight from the container and eat them like chips. Nothing got wasted, not even the heels nobody wanted. Using a lid as a pot holder. Sometimes you needed to set down something hot, and there wasn't a trivet nearby, or the one you had was already holding something else. So you grab a lid, any lid from a pot or pan, flipped it upside down, and used that. Lids were made to handle heat. Same heat as the pots they covered. So they worked just fine as a place to rest a hot pan. The rim kept the pan elevated a little, let air move underneath, protected the counter or table from getting scorched. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it worked in a pinch, and in a country kitchen, you were often in a pinch. Everything was happening at once, and you had to make do with what was within reach. Nobody thought twice about it. You just did it. Saved the countertop, saved the tablecloth, kept cooking. Making homemade jelly with overripe fruit. Fruit didn't stay good forever. Peaches, berries, apples, they get soft, start to bruise, turn too ripe to eat fresh. But that didn't mean they were done. That's when you made jelly. Overripe fruit was actually better for jelly. Sweeter, softer, broke down easier when you cooked it. You'd wash it, cut out any bad spots, throw it in a pot with just enough water to keep it from sticking, and let it cook down until it was soft enough to mash. Then you'd strain it if you wanted clear jelly, or leave the pulp in if you wanted jam. Sugar went in next. Usually about equal parts fruit and sugar, though some people use less. Add pectin if the fruit didn't have enough on its own. Bring it all to a boil, skim the foam, and pour it into jars. Seal them upright, and they'd last a year or more. A whole bushel of peaches that would have rotted in a day or two turned into dozens of jars. That was breakfast for months. That was something to give away when someone needed it. Some households swore by this. Others refused to do it. Using cast iron for everything. If there was one pan that defined how people cooked, it was cast iron. Heavy, black, near impossible to ruin. A lot of families had the same skillet for decades. Pass it down when someone got married or moved out. Cast iron held heat better than anything else. Spread it evenly. No hot spots. No thin areas that burned things before the rest was done. That's why cornbread came out with a crust you could hear when you bit into it. Why chicken fried up crispy all the way through. Why biscuits baked evenly without burning on the bottom. You could use it for everything. Breakfast, dinner, dessert. Fry eggs in it. Bake a cobbler in it. Sear a steak. Make a pan of beans. Same skillet. Start to finish. If you took care of it. Season it with fat, didn't scrub it with soap. It got better the more you used it. Smoother, more non-stick than anything modern. People still cook with skillets that are 100 years old. They still work. Turning leftover coffee into ice cubes. Coffee left over from breakfast didn't get poured out. It went into ice cube trays and into the freezer. When you wanted iced coffee later, you used those cubes instead of regular ice. They kept the drink cold without watering it down as they melted. But that wasn't the only reason to freeze it. Bakers figured out that a coffee cube or two added to chocolate cake batter made the chocolate taste deeper, stronger. Not like coffee, just more like itself. Same with brownies. You could toss a cube into a smoothie if you wanted a little caffeine without brewing a whole pot. Some people even use them in stew. Beef stew, especially. The coffee added something you couldn't quite name, but you noticed if it wasn't there. Wasting food wasn't something people did lightly. A pot of coffee that would have gone down the drain became something useful instead. Using vinegar for cleaning pots. When something burned onto a pot and wouldn't scrape off, you didn't throw the pot away. You filled it with water, poured in a cup of white vinegar, and boiled it. Let it simmer for 15 minutes or so, then turn off the heat and let it cool enough to handle. The vinegar loosened everything. Burnt bits, stuck on food, carbonized edges. All of it came up easier after that. You could scrape it with a wooden spoon, and it would lift right off. For really stubborn messes, you added baking soda after taking off the heat. The fizzing helped. Vinegar cost next to nothing. Specialty cleaners cost a lot more and didn't always work better. This saved pots that otherwise would have been ruined. Kept them in rotation for another year, another decade. Nobody wanted to buy a new pot if the old one could be fixed. Turning leftover cornbread into croutons. Cornbread didn't last long. Day-old cornbread was already starting to dry out. But just like regular bread, it could be cut into cubes and baked into croutons. Only these had a sweetness to them that regular croutons didn't. You cut it into chunks, brush them with melted butter, season with salt, maybe a little cayenne if you like heat, and bake them until they crisped up. About 20 minutes in a moderate oven. They'd come out golden and crunchy, with that cornmeal texture still there. They went into salads, sat on top of soup, got eaten straight from the pan before they even made it to the table. The sweetness of the cornbread played off savory dishes in a way that made both taste better. Cornbread that would have gone stale by evening turned into something people actually looked forward to. Using an old coffee can strain gravy. Not every kitchen had a proper strainer. And even if you did, sometimes it was dirty or being used for something else. So when gravy came out lumpy, you grab an old coffee can, punch a few holes in the bottom with a nail, and use that. The holes let the smooth gravy through. The lump stayed behind. You held it over a bowl, poured the gravy in, and collected what came out below. Simple, effective, didn't require anything you had to go buy. It was the kind of thing that showed how people thought back then. If something needed doing and you didn't have the right tool, you made one. Or you used what was already there in a way it wasn't meant for. A coffee can with holes and it worked just fine. That's all that mattered. Making homemade seasoned salt. Seasoning blends weren't something you bought unless you had money to spare. Most people made their own. Started with salt, added garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, maybe a little cayenne. Mix it all together and kept it in a jar. 1 cup of salt, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of paprika, half a teaspoon of cayenne. That was the base. You could adjust it however you wanted. More heat, less heat. Add pepper. Add dried herbs. Make it yours. It went on everything. Fried chicken, roasted vegetables, grilled meat, popcorn. Once you had a jar of it sitting by the stove, you reached for it without thinking. And it cost a fraction of what the store-bought versions did. You made it once, used it for months. Then you made it again. Every family had their own version of this. Using baking soda to tenderize meat. Tough meat was common. Cheaper cuts, older animals, whatever was available. But there was a way to make it softer without cooking it for hours. You dusted it with baking soda, let it sit, then rinse it off before cooking. 1/4 teaspoon per pound of meat. Sprinkle it on. Let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes. Then rinse it thoroughly under cold water and pat it dry. If you didn't rinse it, the meat would taste off alkaline chemical. But if you did it right, the meat came out noticeably more tender. The baking soda raised the pH on the surface of meat, which kept the proteins from bonding too tightly when they cooked. That made the texture softer, less chewy. It worked especially well on cuts that would otherwise need a braise all day just to be edible. This was the difference between a tough piece of beef and something you could actually eat without working for it. Using a clothesline to dry herbs. Herbs from the garden didn't last long fresh. A few days, maybe a week in the icebox if you were lucky, but if you dried them, they'd keep for months. All you needed was string and a warm, dry place. You tied them in small bunches at the stems, then hung them upside down. Kitchen, shed, covered porch, anywhere with decent airflow worked. A week or two later, they'd be completely dry. You could strip the leaves off the stems, crumble them, and store them in jars away from light. Herbs dried this way had more flavor than anything you'd buy in a store. Fresher, stronger, and they cost nothing beyond the string you use to hang them. Every summer, kitchens would have bunches of herbs hanging from the ceiling or strung across a corner. Basil, thyme, oregano, whatever grew that year. By fall, you had jars lined up ready to last through winter. It connected you to something that had been done the same way for a long time. Making homemade ice cream in a bag. Before electric ice cream makers, you could still make ice cream. All it took was 2 bags, some ice salt, and a willingness to shake for 10 minutes. In a small sealable bag, you'd mix heavy cream, sugar, and vanilla. Seal it tight, squeeze out the air. Then you fill a bigger bag halfway with ice. Add a bunch of salt. Put the small bag inside. Seal that one too and shake. Hard for about 10 minutes straight. The salt lowered the temperature of the ice enough to freeze the cream. The shaking kept it moving, so it didn't freeze into a solid block. What you got was actual ice cream. Smooth, creamy cold, made with your own hands. Kids loved it because they got to help. Adults loved it because it worked and didn't cost much. You could make it with whatever flavors you wanted. Chocolate, strawberry, coffee. Whatever you had. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Using a fork to mix pancake batter. Whisks were fine if you had one and it was clean. But for pancake batter, a fork worked better. The tines mixed things just enough without overdoing it. And that mattered. Pancake batter shouldn't be smooth. It should have lumps. Those lumps work themselves out while the pancakes cook, and leaving them in keeps the batter from getting tough. Overmixing develops gluten, which makes pancakes chewy instead of fluffy. A fork stirred gently. Combine the wet and dry ingredients without beating them to death. And when you were done, you had one less dish to wash. No whisk to clean, no extra effort. Sometimes the simplest tool was the one that worked best. You didn't need to complicate it. Peeling tomatoes with hot water. When it was time to can tomatoes or make sauce, the skins had come off. Peeling them by hand with a knife took forever and wasted half the tomato. But there was a faster way. You scored a shallow X on the bottom of each tomato with a knife. Got a pot of water boiling, and a bowl of ice water ready nearby. Drop the tomatoes in the boiling water for 30 to 60 seconds, just until the skin started pulling back at the cuts. Then you scoop them out and put them straight into the ice bath. Once they cooled enough to touch, the skin slipped off with almost no effort. Just your fingers and a little pressure. You could process a whole basket of tomatoes in the time it used to take to peel 5. This made canning season manageable. Dozens of jars instead of a few. Sauce that lasted all winter instead of running out by Thanksgiving. The blanching didn't cook the tomatoes much, so they were still good for fresh salsa, fresh sauce, whatever you needed. Saving bacon fat to season cast iron. Bacon grease didn't just go into cooking. It went onto the pan too. After you clean your cast iron, usually with coarse salt and a brush, no soap, you'd rub a thin layer of bacon fat over the whole thing while it was still a little warm. That fat filled in the tiny pores in the iron, built up the seasoning layer, kept rust from forming. Over time, It made the surface so smooth that eggs would slide right off without sticking. The bacon flavor became part of the pan itself, adding a little something to everything you cooked in it. This wasn't optional maintenance. This was how you kept cast iron working, how you made it last long enough to hand down. A pan treated this way would outlive the person who owned it. Then it would outlive the next person too. The grease that seasoned your pan came from the same grease that cooked your breakfast. Nothing separate, nothing wasted. These weren't trends. They were habits, built over years of making do, stretching what you had, and remembering what worked. If your family had one rule in the kitchen that never changed, something your grandmother did that your mother still does, that's the kind of thing worth holding on to. Thanks for watching. If this brought back a memory or two, share it with someone who'd remember too. And if you want more like this, go ahead and subscribe.